Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the Select Board's meeting on Tuesday, August 17th. Would you please join us in saying the Pledge of Allegiance, and we'll put the flag up on our computer screens. Pledge allegiance
to the flag
of the United States of America and to the
republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, everyone. This is a special public meeting in which we're going to discuss the American Rescue Plan Act and funding and solicit some public input into that after some discussion of what are permitted uses. And then we have a couple of housekeeping items. So for the public meeting on the ARPA funds, we're going to go to Mike Zulis and Mike Dennehy to lead the discussion.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'll just lay out what the board has discussed in terms of process, and then Mr. Dennehy, as always, can fill in with the substance. The American Rescue Plan funds, the legislation provides that the funds are to be allocated by the executive authority of the municipality. The executive authority of Milton is the Select Board. This is a bit atypical for our town and a departure from our usual practice, which is that funds are allocated and appropriated by the 279 members of town meeting. So it was the charge from the Select Board to the Finance Committee, which is Mr. Doyle, myself, to come up with a procedure for this unusual and bit atypical circumstance for appropriation of funds. And what we suggested to the Select Board, and what the Select Board agreed to some meetings ago, was that we would solicit public input, which is the purpose of the meeting tonight, for the use of and the allocation of those funds. And we'd also keep the warrant committee apprised of it and solicit input from the warrant committee, which we did last night at the warrant committee's meeting. The status of the funding is as follows. The allocation of the American Rescue Plan funds to Milton is approximately $2.88 million. Of that, the town received received the funds in June, approximately $1.44 million. So those funds are in the town's bank account as we speak. We anticipate that the second tranche of that 2.88, the second 1.44 million, to arrive sometime next June of 2022. Now, there's another bucket of money under the American Rescue Plan funds that is coming Milton's way, and that is coming by way of Norfolk County. Norfolk County was allocated, I believe it was $137 million under the American Rescue Plan. And the Norfolk County Commissioners have decided to pass those funds through to the municipalities within Norfolk County. Milton's percentage, or Milton's amount of the Norfolk County funds, is approximately $5.5 million. We expect to receive half of that funding in September, October, half of it being about, 2.75 thereabouts. And then we anticipate receiving the second tranche of that next summer sometime, or next fall sometime in 2022. And again, that would be a 2.75 or 2.77. So that's kind of the procedure here. We're trying to get citizen input, resident input in terms of the board's allocation of those funds. And Mr. Dennehy can fill in on what are the restrictions on the use of those funds. And also he will make a presentation on what the town administration has proposed for a portion of that funding. And that, I'll just say very quickly, a portion of that funding, the town administrator and the town administration has recommended that $1 million of that initial 1.44 be used for a current shovel-ready sewer project. And the Finance Committee agrees with that and has recommended that to the board. But again, that's subject to input tonight and subject to the board's ultimate decision. So I'll turn it over to Mr. Dennehy for a review of the restrictions on the use of these funds, and then kind of a review of the proposal that he and the town administration has made for the use of an initial $1 million of that funding.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Zulus. Mr. Denny, before we get to you, I neglected to mention at the beginning that this meeting is being held remotely pursuant to Chapter 20 of the Acts of 2021, and we should have introduced ourselves. So my name is Katie Conlon. I'm the chair of the board. We have two of our other members here this evening. If you could introduce yourselves.
I'm Mike Zulus.
Melinda Collins.
And Arthur Doyle and Richard Wells may be joining us a little bit later. We're also joined by our town administrator, Michael Dennehy. So my apologies for forgetting that. Mr. Dennehy.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, Mr. Zulus. Member Zulus, that was a great introduction. Yeah, so the use of these funds is a little different than the CARES funds. And I know I've spoken to this board and at the Warrant Committee and at the Finance Subcommittee about this, but I think it's very important to identify the use of these funds. It's a little different than the CARES package. So the CARES package was there to support public health expenditures. This is also here to support public health expenditures, among other things. It's there to replace some lost public sector revenue. So our finance director, Karen Praval, is going back to 2017 to take a look at some revenue estimates and actuals to come up with a 5-year average and see if we could use some of this money to replace any of that lost revenue. It also, and the crux of a lot of this is to invest in water and sewer and broadband infrastructure. Mr. Zulus did a great job of introducing the program and the fact that we have a very shovel-ready project here in Milton. It actually went out to bid 2 weeks ago. Very competitive bid process. It's a water main project in the Belvoir, Cheever, Blue Hills Parkway neighborhood. Will replace approximately 8,000 linear feet of water main infrastructure and hydrant connections and connections to homes. So the idea when the board presented this to me was to reach out to our departments and see if we had some shovel-ready expenditures, understanding that we have some CARES money that's left over. So the CARES money is exclusively to support public health expenditures. So I don't want to mix up and throw too many numbers at the folks on TV, but we have approximately $280,000 of CARES money. So what we've decided to do, well, what I'm going to recommend to do is that we use that portion of money to mitigate a lot of the public health expenditures, i.e. COVID testing. So we're going to re-engage and reinvigorate COVID testing on August 29th up at the Public Works Yard. And you'll see some material distributed about that to let people know that as the school year approaches and Labor Day approaches and people get back to the normal activity in September, that COVID testing will be here. We're revamping and reinvesting in PPE equipment and possibly purchasing a trailer to store that material in, so that if we ever get to the point where we were in March and April of 2020, we'll be ready to handle that stuff. So that CARES money, which has to be expended by December 31st of this calendar year, we're going to use exclusively for public health expenditures. That's not to say that we won't need more of it going forward. Hopefully we don't, but we may want to make sure that we're more prepared than we were previously, and we continue with the necessary testing program. So back to the ARPA stuff. We've identified the major buckets that we can use this stuff for. Some of the projects that were tossed around that actually didn't qualify. So a lot of this stuff we have to qualify with Mass Department of Revenue and the Division of Local Services, who will then pass it on to the counterparts of the federal government. The HVAC system in Town Hall could use an upgrade. Unfortunately, that didn't qualify. The ARPA program is not like the CARES program. There will be a dashboard that's set up on the town's website to specifically identify projects that this executive committee, the select board, chooses to do with the $1.44 million we have now and the additional funding we will receive sometime this fall from Norfolk County and then later next year, understanding that these funds need to be used by December 31st of 2024. So doesn't sound like it's something nearby, but having worked through the ARA funding in 2009, I think the quicker you get shovels in the ground and get this stuff out the door, these projects can help mitigate some premiums that you'll see. During the ARA funding that came through, some of the projects that were funded later in the season actually had a premium set on them because construction was so busy and there was a short supply. We are seeing some drains on our supply chains now. So I think this recommendation for the $1 million for this water main project, the timing of it is very good. And we will have future funding that comes down through the federal government directly to the town, the additional 1.44 and the $5.4 million. And at that time, we can continue to work through any ideas that the public have and the select board to qualify. So I know I was kind of all over the place with money and numbers, but essentially there'll be a dashboard that will be presented as soon as the select board identifies projects that they'd like to go forward to. And my recommendation out of the gate is to take $1 million of the ARPA funding that we have sitting in an exclusive bank account set up by the treasurer about a month ago to mitigate some of the costs for a water main project. The last thing I'll say is by using that $1 million on this $1.9 million project, we then have the ability to stretch our rubber band with Mass Water Resource Authority's zero interest loan. And we may get to a second project this year, we may not have. So the ability to use this ARPA funding will allow the Public Works Department to get to another water main or sewer project in town that we may not have gotten to in FY22. So with that, I'll answer any questions of the board. Other than that, I'll turn it back over to you, Mike. And
yeah, I don't have anything else other than just a quick point. One of the things that Mike mentioned was particularly important to the Finance Committee was using that money as efficiently as possible, and the idea that putting that money to use sooner will allow us to get more bang for our buck before labor and materials prices increase. And so the idea really is to put that money to work so we get more bang for our buck. That was important to the Finance Committee.
Okay. Well, we have several people in the attendees group. So are we ready to open it up to comments and questions from the public, or does anyone on the board have any comments or questions? I have none. I see Melinda says she has none. So Mr. Zulus and Mr. Dennehy, should we go to the public for participation? Okay, so if anyone would like to speak and give suggestions or ask questions regarding the American Rescue Plan Act, please raise your hand and we'll get to you in the order in which we see you. I see we have one caller on the telephone, and I believe it is *9 if you want to unmute to be able to raise your hand, or *9 to raise your hand and then *6 to unmute. Okay, so our first person is Philip. And we'll move you up to okay, already up to panelist. Please state your name and your address for the record.
My name is Phil Johanning. I live at 23 Parkwood Drive in Milton. My reading of the ARPA Act indicates to me that the money could be used for affordable housing. And I wonder if it would be possible for the town to use some of the land at its disposal, let's say the East Milton Fire Station, East Milton Library, the land at the Poor Farm, to, let's say, engage a general contractor to build affordable units. I believe that this is an objective of the town. I believe from attending prior meetings that many of the people who need affordable housing are town residents or have been town residents and wish to remain in town. So I think it's important that the town would provide affordable housing. And I kind of think that this is something that can continue on and on. You build housing, let's say it's townhouse condos. Let's say you build them for 300,000, 400,000, and then you sell them, and the money you get from the sale provides more money for more housing. And so it rolls like like a wagon down the street. It continues to reimburse the town, and the town can continue to invest in affordable housing as we move down that road toward our full commitment. I think that would be an appropriate use. And in that, I felt very disappointed when the town allowed Pulte to move its affordable housing commitment to East Milton. They could have done that, and that's wonderful. But I also think that the Poor Farm was the perfect place for affordable housing to be built. And to the extent that Milton, the town, still owns and controls property at the Poor Farm, I think it's the perfect place to begin a project where we could build affordable housing. That's all I got.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Johanning. Mike Dennehy and Mike Zulus, do you want to get all the comments first, and then, or do you want to respond to people if there are any questions like this as to whether it's a permissible use? What's your preference?
I think it's probably better while we remember what people had to say. And I will say I'm not sure about the affordable housing aspect to it. Mike may have a view. Melinda may have a view on that. It may well be within it. I just don't. Mike may be able to elaborate on that.
Yeah, members, so I did start looking at affordable housing. Obviously, haven't met with the Affordable Housing Committee. If you look at California, for instance, recently their governor suggested using $1.75 billion of ARPA funding for affordable housing in California. The only catch is he's doing shovel-ready projects, right? I'm not sure if we have a shovel-ready project. I mean, December 2024 is a while away, but you know, most of the reading I have done with respect to affordable housing is relative to projects that are basically ready to go, like this water main project that we're looking at, and is basically shovel ready, but something definitely we can look further into.
Okay, thank you. So good question. We'll look into that further. The next speaker is John Rowe.
Hi, good evening. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Very good, thank you. Just one question on the shovel-ready sewer and waterworks projects. Are these funded without this money? How are we going to pay for this without this money?
The project that was discussed by Mr. Dennehy.
Yes.
Dennehy, do you want to address that?
Sure. So thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you for the question, Mr. Rowe. Each year, the town of Milton receives $900,000 in zero interest loans from the Mass Water Resource Authority. That is one of the main contributors to that. And then we bond the other projects through the treasurer. It's part of the capital bonding process. So the ability to use this, again, just to I don't want to I think I need to reiterate the fact that this ARPA 1 million will make sure that we free up that 900,000 for this year and be able to use that either through zero interest loans, through MWRA, or through bonding.
So what you're proposing is to take the money from the federal government and paying for it instead of borrowing.
Correct.
Okay. And
have
we
the
still
ability
have the
to
borrow. We still have the 900,000 or whatever it is to borrow from the state or MWRA to fix other things.
Correct. And there is a second project in the pipeline, Mr. Rowe. Marina Fernandez, our town engineer, talked about the scientific study that was done before she got to the town that they're working off that basically prioritizes infrastructure. I believe the next project in the pipeline is some pipes that were installed in 1912 on a couple of the streets in our community. So there is a priority list that Public Works is working off of. Obviously, the dollar amount also comes into play based on our ceiling with MWRA and the funding that we have available, and then what we have for capital projects in the pipeline. But very good question.
All right, yeah, because you do understand that we have the highest rates in the whole MWRA system. And I'm not sure why we have the highest rates in the system, but we do.
Okay, thank you. Do you have other suggestions or questions or comments, Mr. Rowe?
Well, I just hope that the money is spent wisely in on infrastructure projects or on something that can help people in the town, such as affordable housing. I just don't want it pilfered away. That's all. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments
Thank you.
and for attending tonight. Our next
you.
speaker is Andrew Minart. Hope I pronounced your name correctly.
Yes, hi, I'm Andrew Minert. I live at 46 Ridge Road in Milton. I wanted to talk about the municipal broadband project. I think that that makes a whole lot of sense as an investment for the town, in addition to saving the town and its schools and municipal buildings money for telecom costs into the future. It also opens up the possibility of providing internet service to the residents and saving residents money. Anywhere municipal broadband has gone in has driven down the costs of broadband.
Okay, thank you very much.
And sorry, there's many places in town that only have one internet service provider, and driving down the cost would help them. I also like the idea of the affordable housing as well. So thank you.
Okay, thank you. Cindy Christensen.
I like my friends John Rowe and Phil Johanning's suggestion that at least some of this money go towards affordable housing. There were meetings at the end of June this year in Massachusetts about using ARPA funding for affordable housing. And there's a website you can look at to see that there's various slides and information about doing it. You may recall that when the Pulte contract was signed by the select board at that time, they removed the affordable housing from it, that South Shore Habitat for Humanity was set up and was participating and planning to do on that, the poor farm. It was my understanding, because I came here and became a board member for South Shore Habitat. My understanding is that they were removed without their knowledge and only found out after the Pultes had been chosen for that for that site. So it would be a really nice thing to do to get affordable housing here, but to also use South Shore Habitat for Humanity for that purpose. And my understanding is there's still 4.3 acres available on the poor farm. That would be a great project to start. The Habitat homes, as you know, build community spirit. A lot of the funding could occur, additional funding could occur through South Shore Habitat efforts. It's one really nice way of bringing communities together and welcoming people to live in our town who need affordable housing. So I encourage you very much to look at the information that was provided back in June for using some of this money for affordable housing. That's it.
Okay, thank you, Cindy. I see no further hands. There was someone who had a hand up and no longer does. Another person, actually, no, we have several. Roxanne Musto.
I see. Okay. Hi, good evening to everybody. I have a couple of questions with the funds. I think the affordable housing is a great idea. What about things that, like the lighting, for instance? I know that we have the municipal lighting. Have we done that around the whole town yet? And if not, what is the cost to that? I know some of the streets probably need a little bit more lighting. So also wanted to look into that as a possibility. I know when I drive around, some of the streets are pretty dark. Look like they could use a few extra lights on them. can any of these funds be put away at all, or do they have to be used? For instance, could they be put into the capital stabilization fund? Could they be used towards lowering some of our costs in terms of insurances that we pay? And then also, I think, what other things were capital items that the capital committee had thought of would be interested to know. And also things such as the fire stations. Can they be used towards any of that kind of project? And I guess my final thought, I know I have a lot of different ideas here, but my final thought was, is there anything with it that can be used to help everybody in the town, like some kind of, I don't want to say a rebate, but almost like something back and for all of the residents? For instance, will we pay for that 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 fee that's for the water runoff and so forth? I'm just trying to think outside the box if there's some other things that we can do with it. That's all.
Okay, thank you, Roxanne. I think some of those we can answer through Mr. Zulus or Mr. Dennehy.
Thank you.
Pardon me. Mike, I have down affordable housing, which we talked about. Lighting, Mike, I think you can take that one.
Yeah, great question, Roxanne. So in 2018, we retrofit all 3,300 lights in Milton. The only 29 lights we did not retrofit are the lights that are owned either on DCR roadways or lights that are owned by Milton Academy on a stretch of Center Street. All of the lights have been retrofit. We have a wire division, two-man wire division that check those lights consistently. That's not to say, and I've noticed some streets driving around at night as well, Ms. Musto, that may be in need of other lights. I don't think this will qualify for that, but that's something that I can certainly run up the flagpole and have Karen Paval reach out to DOR on that.
Okay.
With respect to, why don't we continue, Mike, and then if there's any questions you can't answer them.
Yeah, the next one I have is putting the money away. And so my understanding is that all the funding has to be used by December 31st, 2024. And it specifically can't be used to pay off debt. So it needs to be used for some kind of projects. And then the fire stations, I don't believe we can fit that in. I'm not sure if there's a way to squeeze that in, but in the definition, I don't think so. But Mike, you might have a different thought.
It specifically talks about infrastructure, and it mentions water, sewer, and broadband infrastructure. Basically, they want to improve drinking water, support vital wastewater, decrease stormwater, and improve municipal broadband. Basically, some of the things we noticed in working through COVID, where you have to make sure your water supply is clean. You have to make sure people can get internet access. Things like that specifically identify needs that arose or came about or were highlighted throughout the COVID process. But something like I can look into that as well, but I do not think they qualify.
And then the last thing I had from Roxanne is the money for the residents. And I think that might come under the umbrella of some kind of COVID related expenses, because, the way I think of this really is, you have your infrastructure projects, sewer, water, and municipal broadband, which are the allowable infrastructure projects, and then kind of COVID related expenses. So maybe there's something under COVID related expenses, but I'm not aware of specifically how we do that. Mike, you might have more on that.
Yeah, there is a general, very somewhat ambiguous bucket that talks about the negative economic impacts, and it talks about harms to workers and households and industries. But that's something we can certainly look at. But I don't think it can be used to mitigate a tax or a fee per se.
Okay. Okay, thank you.
I think the other item on Roxanne's list was
Yeah.
the capital committee, whether the capital committee has some changes on their list.
Yeah.
Yeah, and again, I think if the items relate to sewer, water, if the capital items relating to sewer, water, or municipal broadband, that's easy, that fits. The other ones, you'd have to try to, I think, shoehorn it in somehow to the definition.
And I will say, if I can add on, Member Zulus, Karen Paval, our finance director, has been in touch with Sean Cronin and Mike Sweeney at DOR and DLS respectively, consistently. The CARES money was money we would spend, pay out of the town's general fund, and then get reimbursed for. This is a different project. This is a different process. Sorry, this process, we have to get approval for that from ARPA, our ARPA representatives or state representatives to get that project funded, knowing that we have the money in hand first. This is not a reimbursing program. So the clarification for this stuff will come before the money is awarded or spent.
I see that Ms. Collins has her hand raised. Ms. Collins.
Thank you, Madam Chair. If I could just add to some of that a little bit. Yeah, we're not allowed to reduce taxes. So anything that has sort of a similar result to that is a no. But the question about insurance is interesting because I haven't read very deeply on it, but OPEB, which is other post-employment benefits, which is basically retirees' health insurance. I think we may be able to make contributions to that. I don't know whether that makes sense. It's a question for our actuaries, and the retirement board is meeting soon. So that's probably something that they could talk to. And so I just wanted to qualify that. Madam Chair, could I say a few things about affordable housing?
Yes, I think that would be appropriate. And Ms. Collins has been working a lot on affordable housing and taking the lead for the board on the town farm, and may be able to give us an update.
Thank you.
Discussion for a little bit tonight and more at a future meeting.
Right. I don't want to take a lot of time from everyone here, but I was heartened to hear people calling for affordable housing, and we have been working on the town farm. And that is a bit of a process because it's actually in a part of the governor's certain trust. So we've been working with the Attorney General's office, and actually I just had a meeting with them today. And we'll be talking about that at a future meeting, I think our next meeting. But we also have our vetting parcels that are municipally owned, have been doing that. The Housing Committee and the Affordable Housing Trust just had a meeting 2 weeks ago with the Master Plan Implementation Committee, and we've been busy trying to secure some pre-development funds because there's a lot of work unwinding some of these parcels because they might be a parks parcel or something along those lines. But we've even been sort of pressure testing parcels to see what could go on them, and there's a lot of talk about the MBTA communities because we are one of those, and we're going to need to really move quickly on that once the governor says it's time. So we are working on it. I'm very excited about that, and it may be that some pre-development funds could come. My understanding was that you needed more on the shovel ready side, but I'll go back and reread. So thank you.
Okay, thank you. More to come on that topic. John David Corey is our next speaker. Mr. Corey.
Yes, thank you very much for having the public meeting. I'm at 1452 Canton Avenue. And I just wanted to see if one of the things that came up during the whole COVID, for me anyways, and a lot of, I think the residents of Milton was, being at home a lot of the time and finding that they were spending more time in parks, being outside, going for walks after dinner, really probably meeting more of their neighbors than they used to do. And I think that was, very, I enjoyed that part of the COVID, certainly, as far as the, being at home and not being, whatever it might be. So that was actually one of the benefits I think that we all got from doing that. And I just would like to see if the town using these resources would be able to use them for capital projects to enhance accessibility in the town. I know that the town, for what I see driving around, I don't want to beat up the town, but there are missing crosswalks, faded crosswalks, thermoplastic paint is missing. We could, like for example, at Roses Lane, Milton Academy did a nice project to shrink the pavement and really make that intersection more pedestrian friendly. Somebody with a wheelchair could use the intersection now, whereas before they would really just go out there and hope that they slow down. But now cars I see very much slow down. And I don't know if it's just my imagination, but I swear I see more people out walking and crossing there than I ever saw before. So things like certainly the crosswalks, in traffic calming or roadway diets or signage, wayfinding. I think that those types of projects are strictly capital. They're not a reimbursement for something. They're one-off projects that I think would really work well for this type of a shot in the arm type of money. And I think it would boost the quality of life for the residents and also allow people that are aging in their homes to feel comfortable walking and getting out. It sort of dovetails a little bit into the lighting comment. But so those are the things that I do think that the idea of using the resources for this type of capital could dovetail quite well with the COVID as a response to the pandemic. So thank you very much for taking my call.
Okay, thank you very much. Any member of the board or Mr. Denny have any comments or response to that? Sounds like worth looking into. Mr. Dennehy.
Yeah, certainly look into it. As a former Public Works Commissioner, you can never have enough money. The town continues to play catch up. The pavement summary report, management report, which is available on the town's website, talks, I think it's about $25 million to bring the town up to speed from a construction perspective. And that's just roadways. That doesn't include sidewalks. So always looking for more money for Public Works. Not to take it from the other entities in town, but I wear that hat often. We do have a small influx of money coming in. Those of you watching tonight are on the call. So Governor Baker 3 years ago instituted a rideshare program. So for every rideshare that originates in Milton, the state collects 20 cents and the town gets 10 cents of that. And that money this year is approximately $15,000. That money has to be used for transportation upgrades. So we are spending money this year on more of the solar powered pedestrian crossing signals, flashing signals, the stop signs, and we are going to do some thermoplasting. 2 years ago, Tom McCarthy and the Public Works folks actually purchased our own painting machine, so we can do a lot of that in-house. But to Mr. Corey's point, there's a lot of work to be done from a Public Works perspective, accommodating all modes of traffic in town, but it is a priority. I'm not sure if it fits into this funding source, but certainly something that Chase Berkeley and DPW continue to advocate for, and we will continue to prioritize.
Okay, we have Deborah Felton. Good evening, Deborah.
Hi, Deborah Felton, town meeting member, precinct 2, 20 Willoughby Road. Many of you know I'm the executive director at Fuller Village. Couple of points. We have a master plan, and there was a lot of input from residents on that plan. And I think that we should really go back and look at that. There are a lot of great ideas about how to improve health and public health of residents, like transportation around town, so that we're not all driving our car to the fruit center or wherever, or the library, that there's actually like a free little minibus. That was a big thing that came up during the master plan, but we have it. We should work that plan. It got a lot of input. This is probably not on the infrastructure, but of course, I didn't realize you were meeting tonight, and I would remiss if I didn't say that some money somewhere should be used to educate town employees and to get 100% vaccination buy-in of your town employees, because we as taxpayers are paying the salary of town employees. And this is becoming a huge issue. As everybody may know, all the hospitals are now starting up again their command centers to respond to COVID. I am responsible for 400 residents at Fuller Village, and we are, except for 2 people out of 400, we're all vaccinated, including everyone in my staff. And we have mandatory vaccines. And it's time for the town to stand up and educate their employees and try to strive to reach that 100% vaccination rate. And we should find some money to do that. Thank you.
Hey, thank you, Deborah. Do we have anyone else who hasn't had a chance to speak yet? And then we'll go back to anyone who's already spoken. Anyone else in the group of attendees? If so, please raise your hand. And if you're on the telephone with the last 3 digits of your number 177, if you would like to speak, it's *9 to raise your hand and then *6 to unmute. Just wait a few seconds and see if we see any other hands raised. Okay, then we'll go back to Mr. Joe Henning.
Yeah, hi, Phil Henning, 23 Parkwood Drive. When I was listening to Roxanne, I thought it was an interesting question about water. And I wonder if the town has any remaining lead pipes that deliver water to our houses. And I wonder if these have all been mapped and if there's any idea about what it would take to replace any remaining lead pipes. That was a thought I had after I listened to Roxanne, but I had another thought about broadband. I listened to the meeting of the Warrant Committee last night, and I had some concerns about what other options had been considered. And my thought was that I'm not sure that's the best use. What was said was that there was a possibility that it could act as let's say a spine for expansion of the program outside of the town, but broadband is primarily for the town. And I began to wonder, have we approached Comcast about continuing to support the current network? And have we talked to Comcast about repairing or replacing the 2 fiber optic strands? I began to wonder, have we approached Comcast and asked them, have we presented all the uses that we need in the town and asked them to quote on it, like Comcast Business? I was concerned also when I think one of the Warrant Committee members, I couldn't read his name, asked that question specifically, like, what other things have we considered? And I wasn't sure that the answer was adequately, the response was adequately given. I also was concerned about another Warrant Committee member who asked, she said, you're saying that this system that we have now is obsolete. So is this new system an advanced technology? Are we going beyond? And the gentleman, I'm not sure that he gave the correct answer, but the one who was giving the presentation said, it's primarily capacity. So he didn't say we were going to a better technology. He was just saying we're getting more capacity. So when I looked at all of the issues, I sort of felt that it doesn't sound like we're getting something necessarily better, but we are getting something bigger. And the cost seems tremendous. And I wonder if Comcast Business could deliver all the services we need. And it has the beauty of being flexible. All we have to do is buy more from Comcast when we need it. So, I wasn't sure about broadband. I don't know that it's the best use of the money available. And I guess I would go back to the possibility of affordable housing. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Joe Henning. Before we go to Mr. Denny here, Mr. Zulus, if there's anyone who's recently joined the meeting, feel free to raise your hand if you'd like to offer a suggestion for the use of the American Rescue Plan Act funds or ask a question. So we had a question about lead pipes and about broadband.
Madam Chair, there are no lead pipes on the public right of way. The only lead pipes in town are on private property, which are the property owner's responsibility.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Zulus, do you want to take the broadband question?
Sure, and that was Rob Lynch, who's the secretary of the Broadband Committee, who was speaking last night to the Warrant Committee. The answer is, Phil, is that it would be advanced technology that would take us far into the future, and it would provide a number of fiber optic strands. Right now, as Rob pointed out, there are just a few, maybe 8 fiber optic strands, of which 6 don't even work. Right, so this would provide a number of fiber optic strands, and it would be advanced technology. Whether Comcast would do it, when we were negotiating with them 2 years ago, they didn't want to have anything to do with it. So I guess it's possible that they would want to build it for us, and it's possible that we would have to we could try to purchase it from them, and that is a possibility. But the view of the Broadband Committee is, while you wouldn't have an upfront cost if you went that route, if you bought it from Comcast Business, ultimately you're going to be paying a lot more, and you're not going to have control over particularly the government INET. You're not going to have control over advanced use for police and first responder communications, school technology. You're not going to have the kind of control to be able to do additional things with that government INET. And then to go back to what Mr. Minor mentioned, the Broadband Committee is recommending that a portion of the cable fund, of which there's $750,000 sitting there from franchise fees with the town, that a portion of that be used for building a government INET, and a portion of the ARPA funds. Now, we haven't figured out what the mix is yet. We're going to make a recommendation on that. The cost to build a new INET would be about $1 million. As I said, the $750,000 in the cable fund, and then we'll be making a recommendation. The Broadband Committee will be making a recommendation for use of the cable fund, a certain amount of the cable fund, and a certain amount of ARPA funds to build this INET, which would be the backbone, could be the backbone if the town decides and the residents decide that they want to build out a fiber to the home network. That could serve as the backbone. We need it anyway for the government, for the town internal communications, for the schools, for MPEG access, for first responders, for police, for fire. But it could also form the backbone if the residents in the town decide that they want to go the route of fiber to the home. Certainly the Broadband Committee is going to make a recommendation on that, because we all believe that that makes sense. But it's ultimately going to be up to the residents. So sorry if that was a little more proselytizing on broadband than I should have, but that's kind of where it sits.
Okay, so we have 2 others with their hands raised. Andrew Minor.
Yes, thank you. I agree generally that we should use money for affordable housing. I don't think that it should be an exclusive decision of affordable housing or broadband, but if anything, the pandemic has shown us how important affordable broadband is. And with the fact that this project could build the foundation for a municipal fiber network that would make broadband more affordable to the community as a whole. And so I think that's a really important thing, especially if we are looking at people having to do schooling from home and working from home. Even its presence brings competition to the market that will force Comcast and other providers to either build out and repair infrastructure or provide more competitive pricing. And so regarding the advanced technology aspect, I've looked into the plan, and as someone who is in tech and works in IT, it certainly is investing in advanced technology, going to 10 gigabit connections and having a 40 gigabit connection between the 2 core sites is a huge increase and boost. And the hardware that's recommended is certainly reasonable, top of the line, without being excessive. And I think it's responsibly planned. So thank you.
Thank you. And John Rowe. Mr. Rowe, it looks like you're on mute.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can hear you.
Perfect. Thank you. Quick question about Comcast. Has the town put an RFP out to Comcast and asked them for a business solution? And if not, why not?
Mr. Willis, would you like to handle that one?
Yeah, so the answer is no. And so we have a current contract with them for cable, right? We haven't given them, we haven't sought an RFP, we haven't issued an RFP for them to provide the business solution. The recommendation of the broadband committee was that that wouldn't be a cost-effective solution. That ultimately we'd end up paying a lot more and we'd have a lot less control.
But we don't know because we haven't asked them.
Certainly, select board could decide to do that.
Well, it's free to ask for a proposal. And I think for anybody to decide what we're going to do, we need a proposal from Comcast. And that's a reasonable thing to do, in my opinion. And I don't see how anybody could say that we can go with the town's broadband solution without having a proposal from Comcast. I don't know, just my thoughts as a reasonable person.
Okay, well, thank you, Mr. Rowe. Is there anyone else, anyone else who would like to offer a suggestion or ask a question relating to the American Rescue Plan Act funding, the uses of the money, or any thoughts that the board has already presented? Roxanne Musto.
I'm wondering if when the other funds become available, like the 5 million and the other 1.44, before that, are you going to have another, informational meeting like this, or what is the plan, I guess?
I don't know if the finance committee has addressed it. We certainly could, and the commitment and the goal of the board is to be transparent and to solicit public input. So Mike, has the finance committee addressed that?
That was the plan, and that is the plan to kind of, this is an ongoing iterative process. The reason that we wanted to have it now is that we had a proposal for the first $1 million from the town administrator, and we have 1.44 in our bank account. So the idea was, okay, let's get some initial input in some initial ideas. But yeah, the idea is that this is going to be an ongoing process, and whenever we have a proposal in front of us, and this is personal, select board hasn't decided this, but I think we go and vet it with the residents.
Okay, for the sake of anyone who just joined the meeting, we received 1.4 million. We expect to receive another 1.4 million next year directly from the federal government. And then the county funds that will be passed along to the town, half this year and half next year, total 5.5 million. So we will have other public opportunities for input and questions. Is there anyone else this evening who has a question? I see Ms. Roxanne Musto's hand is.
Sorry, I just have one other quick thing. Just on the questions that were asked tonight that we didn't have answers for, will you be able to get back to us on that? Like, for instance, with the lighting and different little things. Just wondering if you'll be able to get back individually with us, that's all.
Individually, we can probably certainly report on it at a board meeting, and one of our next discussions. We do have the ARPA funding on our August 25th agenda, which is our next meeting. And if there's something before then, I suppose we could ask the town administrator if you had something in particular that you were asking Roxanne about the streetlights, we could get back to you on that.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you. All right, last call. Anyone else? I see no further hands. So thank you, everyone who joined us this evening for the discussion. Thank you for all the inputs. We got some good suggestions, some things we were already thinking about, some things we may not have been, but that's the purpose of the meeting. So thank you all for participating this evening. We have just a couple of housekeeping items on our agenda. Item 4 is just a discussion and approval of town meeting articles that we had voted to submit before we had the actual text. Both of these articles came from the fire Building Committee, and the only one that we really haven't voted having the form of the article is the transfer of funds from the capital stabilization fund to the general fund. It's already been provided to the warrant committee, so this is really a formality following on our vote of the 2 meetings ago to include that article in the warrant. So do we have a motion to include Article 8 in the warrant for the October special town meeting?
I'll move to include Article 8 relating to the transfer from the capital stabilization fund in the warrant for the October town meeting.
Seconded by Ms. Collins. Okay, all in favor? Mr. Zulus,
Yes.
Ms. Collins,
Yes.
and myself, yes. Okay, next item is meeting minutes. Mr. Zulus, we have several meeting dates.
So we have, although we received the drafts today, and I did get some feedback, but we have drafts for June 9th, June 17th, June 19th, June 23rd, July 2nd, and July 12th. Let me just make sure that's right. June 9th, June 17th, June 23rd.
Yeah, I think it's,
Oh, yeah, that's, yeah, so it's June 9th, June 17th, June 21st. Looks like it was a typo in the agenda. June 23rd, July 2nd, and July 12th. So if the members are ready to vote them, we can vote them tonight, or if we want to vote them next week, we can do that.
well, since we specifically listed them, do we want to leave out the 21st and come back to that one at the next meeting, 21st of June, since it's not technically on the agenda?
Sure.
So we'd have June 9th, 17th, and 23rd. And then we had July 2nd and 12th. I'm going to abstain on July 12th since I was not at that meeting. So maybe we could vote that one separately than the others. Ms. Collins, you had a chance to read the minutes? You're on mute. Ms. Collins, you're on mute.
Sorry, I had read and sent in edits a while ago, but I just saw these when I logged on to the meeting, so my apologies for that.
Okay, so do we want to vote them this evening? Any of them?
I haven't had a chance. I don't know what more changes have been made. So I haven't had a chance to read them. I apologize.
Okay. All right, should we defer them? Okay. All right, we'll defer the meeting minutes. Topics the chair did not reasonably anticipate would be discussed. I did not have any under that category. So anything that recent, Mr. Dennehy?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I would just like to acknowledge the passing and send my deepest sympathy to the Pascantonio family. Don Pascantonio, who was an employee of the Public Works Department for 33 years, passed away today. So I think may he rest in eternal peace, and our deepest sympathy to the Pascantonio family.
Why don't we take a moment of silence for Mr. Pascantonio?
Thank you.
Thank you, and our condolences to the family of Mr. Pascantonio. If no one has anything else this evening, then we will adjourn.
Move to adjourn?
Second, all in favor, Mr. Zulus,
Yes.
Ms. Collins,
Yes.
and myself, yes. Thank you, everyone. Good evening.
Thank you.